How can a man be thrown out at 19 with one sentence and still carry that sentence for almost 30 years? Why would a briefcase left in a Mercedes feel heavier than any tire I lifted all week? What I saw on that label made me call a law firm number with shaking hands, even though I kept my voice calm. My name is Glen Parker. I am 47 years old. I work at a tire shop off a busy road, near a row of fast food places and a gas station. I make $13 an hour. Some weeks I get enough hours. Some weeks I do not. I do not complain much at work. I learned a long time ago that complaints do not pay rent. My days are simple. I wake up before sunrise. I drink cheap coffee in my small kitchen. I eat the same breakfast most mornings. 2 eggs when I can, oatmeal when I cannot. I check my phone. I check my bank balance. Then I check it again, like the number will change if I look harder. I live alone in a small apartment. It is clean, but it is plain. I do not buy decorations. I buy what I need and nothing more. My couch is old. One arm is lower than the other. I sit on the stronger side. I have a small table by the window. I pay my bills there. I also keep my receipts there, in a thin folder, because I like to know where my money goes. I do not have much money, so I track it like it matters. I take the bus to work. Some mornings I stand because there are no seats. I do not mind. I watch people on the bus. I see office clothes, clean shoes, phones that cost more than my rent. I do not judge them. I just notice. I notice how people hold their lives in their hands like they are normal things. At work, I show up 10 minutes early. I like to unlock the side door and turn on the lights before customers arrive. The shop smells like rubber and oil. The floor has old stains that never come out. The air compressor makes a sound that sits in your ears after a while. The radio plays in the background. Some days the radio is too loud. Some days it is quiet. No one asks me what I prefer. We do tires, brakes, and small work, mostly tires. People come in angry because tires cost money. People come in nervous because they worry about safety. People also come in proud because their cars are expensive. They talk about their cars like they are family. They look at us like we are tools. My manager is named Omar Reyes. He is 44. He is not cruel. He is not kind either. He is practical. He likes the numbers to look right. He likes the reviews to stay positive. He wants the shop to run without trouble. When a customer gets loud, Omar tries to calm the customer. That sounds fair, but it usually means the worker takes the blame. I work with a guy named Nate Kwan. He is close to my age. Nate is quiet like me. He does not perform for customers. He does the job. We do not talk much, but we understand each other. When a customer is rude, Nate's eyes will meet mine for half a second. That is enough. That week was like most weeks. The weather was cold. My hands were dry and cracked. I wore gloves when I could, but gloves slow me down. When you are paid by the hour, speed matters. If you are slow, you get fewer hours. That is how it feels, even if no one says it out loud. We had a steady line of cars, minivans, work trucks, old sedans. Then the expensive ones started to show up. That happens when winter hits, because people with money do not want to slide even once. Late morning, a man came in wearing a clean coat and a watch that caught the light. He had a luxury car. I will not name the exact model, but it was the kind of car people take pictures of. He walked into the waiting area like the shop belonged to him. He looked around at the chairs, the tire posters, the coffee machine, and he made a face like he smelled something bad. Omar greeted him with a smile. The man spoke with a calm voice that still felt sharp. He asked if we had people who knew how to work on a car like his. He said some places hire anyone, and he did not want mistakes. He looked at me when he said it. I kept my face still. I was holding a tire iron. I was in work clothes, with grease marks that never fully wash out. I did not look like confidence to him. I looked like the thing that should stay in the back. Omar tried to keep the customer happy. He told him we work on all kinds of cars. He told him we follow procedures. He told him we stand behind our work. The man nodded, but he did not look convinced. He said he had a meeting later and he could not waste time. He said he wanted the best tech on his car. Omar glanced at me again. He did not say my name. He did not say I was good. He just told the customer we would take care of it, and it would be quick. I took the job without arguing. That is my pattern. I do not fight for respect in a place that sells tires. I save my energy for getting through the day. I pulled the car into the bay. The paint was clean enough to reflect the overhead lights. The wheels were large and shiny. I worked carefully. I always work carefully, but with a car like that, you have to be even more precise. Customers like that do not forgive normal human mistakes. They treat a small scratch like a moral failure. While I worked, the man stayed in the waiting area. He sat where he could see the bay through the glass. He watched me like a supervisor. He took phone calls. He spoke in a confident way. He said numbers out loud, like they meant something. He laughed once, loud enough for me to hear through the glass. At one point, he walked closer to the window and pointed at the car. He asked Omar if I was using the right tools. He said he saw a news story about bad shops. He said he would not be surprised if people tried to cut corners. Omar nodded and assured him again. Omar did not come into the bay to ask if I was okay. He did not come in to back me up. He stayed in the front, smoothing things over. That is how it usually goes. The worker is a shield, the manager is a face, the customer is a judge. I finished the tire change. I checked torque twice. I cleaned my hands and wiped down the wheel area. I did what I always do, because I know pride does not come from the customer. It comes from the work. Then I opened the trunk to put the old tires back in, like our process requires for certain returns. The trunk opened smoothly, slow and quiet. The inside was clean and lined. That is when I saw the briefcase. It was black. It looked expensive. It was placed near the side, like someone set it down and forgot it. It was not a small bag. It was the kind of case you do not forget if your mind is calm. That told me the owner had been distracted. I paused. I did not touch it right away. We have a policy for lost items. You do not go through a customer's property. You do not take anything out. You report it. You secure it. You document it. That protects the shop and it protects the worker. I called Nate over with a hand signal. Nate came and looked. He did not say much. He nodded once. That meant he understood what I was thinking. I called Omar into the bay. Omar came in, still holding his phone. He looked at the trunk and the briefcase. He immediately shifted into his customer voice. He told me to close the trunk and finish the job. He said he would handle it. I told him we should log it. Omar said we would. He said the customer was in a hurry and we should not create a scene. He wanted the car out, the payment done, and the review protected. That was his priority. I closed the trunk, finished the paperwork steps on my side, and moved the car back to the front pickup area. The customer stood up fast when he saw the car. He looked relieved. He asked if it was done. Omar told him it was done, and everything was perfect. The customer nodded like that was expected. The customer paid. He left quickly. He did not check the trunk. He did not look back. Omar looked at me and Nate and told us to stay quiet about the briefcase. He said we would call the customer and return it. He said these people get nervous fast. He said they can make trouble for a shop. He also said we had to be careful because people might accuse us of taking something. I understood that part. I did. Still, his words made me feel like the suspect before anyone even asked a question. Omar took the briefcase into his small office. He asked me to come with him so we could follow the policy. He opened the office drawer and took out the lost and found log. He told me to write the date, time, and item description. I wrote it. I wrote that it was a black briefcase left in a customer trunk. Omar said he needed to confirm the owner's name, so he would check the customer record. He set the briefcase on the desk. He did not open it fully. He said we should not. Then he did something that he probably thought was harmless. He lifted the top just enough to see if there was a business card. For a moment, I could see inside. Not everything. Just a layer of papers near the top. There was a bold label on one of the folders. It was printed in large letters like a serious office label. The words stood out because they were plain and cold. It said, "Estate Fraud, Anderson Case 2006. I did not move. My body stayed still, but my mind did not. Anderson was my mother's maiden name. It is a name I have not said out loud in years. I keep it inside me like a closed drawer. Seeing it in a folder inside a stranger's briefcase felt unreal. Omar did not notice my face. He was focused on finding a card. He saw letterhead on top and a phone number. He said he found the number of a law firm. He said the customer probably had legal work and forgot it. He said that is why we had to return it fast and clean. I nodded. I kept my voice calm. I told him I understood. Omar wrote the phone number down. He told the front desk to call the customer. The customer did not answer. Omar left a message. He said we would store the briefcase in the safe cabinet until the customer returned. He told me to sign the log. I signed it. Nate signed as a witness. We followed the process. The rest of the day continued. Cars came in, tires came off, tires went on, customers complained about prices. Customers thanked us like we were helpful machines. I moved through the hours like I always do, but the label stayed in my head. Anderson Case 2006. It did not feel like a random detail. It felt like a finger pointing at a locked room in my life. When my shift ended, I washed my hands. The soap never fully removes the smell of rubber. I changed into my jacket. Nate asked if I was okay. He did not press. He said he noticed I went quiet. I told him I was just tired. That was not a full lie. I was tired. I was tired in a deeper way. I rode the bus home. The city lights passed by the window. People scrolled on their phones. A couple laughed softly. I held onto the rail and stared at the floor. At home, I ate a simple dinner. I did not turn on the TV. I sat at the table by the window. I opened my folder of receipts without meaning to. I stared at numbers that did not matter. Then I closed it. I kept seeing the folder label in my mind, like it was stuck behind my eyes. I told myself it could mean nothing. I told myself Anderson is a common name. I told myself I was reaching. But my body did not believe my words. My body felt the old story rising, the one I never solved, the one I was forced to accept without proof. After my mother was no longer with us, my stepfather took control of everything. He told people he was doing what was proper. He told me I was not connected enough to ask questions. He told me I should be grateful he even let me stay as long as he did. I did not have money for lawyers. I did not have adults who would fight for me. I had a backpack and a bus route. Now I had a law firm number written in Omar's handwriting on a scrap of paper. And I had a case label that matched my mother's name and a year that fit the timeline. I did not feel anger, not the loud kind. I felt something colder. I felt clarity starting to form, like ice on water. I picked up my phone. I looked at the scrap of paper again. I typed the number in slowly to avoid mistakes. I sat very still in my kitchen chair. I took a breath that filled my chest and then left it. Then I pressed call. I did not sleep much that night. I did not feel panic. I felt alert. It was like my mind finally had a problem it could hold with two hands. I kept thinking about that folder label and the year on it. I also kept hearing my stepfather's voice from years ago, like a sound that never fully left the room. I grew up with my mother and me in a small house. It was not fancy, but it was steady. She worked hard. She kept lists on the fridge. She paid bills on time. She liked simple routines. She also liked her maiden name. She would write it on forms with care, even after she married. She told me it was part of who she was. She said names mattered because they carried history. When I was a teenager, Rick Colton entered our lives. He came in with strong manners and a clean suit. He talked with confidence. He brought gifts the first time I met him. He said he cared about my mother. He said he wanted stability for our home. He spoke like he already knew what was best. At first, I was grateful because my mother looked less tired when he was around, but I also noticed how he watched people. He liked to measure who had power and who did not. He listened for weakness. He did not raise his voice often. He did not need to. He could change a room with a calm sentence. After Rick married my mother, the house felt different. It looked the same, but the air changed. Some rules became his rules. Some choices became his decisions. My mother still smiled, but she stopped talking as openly in front of him. When I asked her small questions, she would answer quickly and then look toward him, like she was checking if she was allowed to speak. He never hit me. He never made big scenes. His control was quieter than that. He would correct me in front of others with a polite tone. He would talk about respect and gratitude and earning your place. He would ask me about my plans and then tell me my plans were not realistic. He would say he was just trying to help. I tried to be easy. I did chores. I stayed out of the way. I got a part-time job after school. I thought if I worked hard and stayed calm, the tension would go away. But it did not. It grew slowly, like a leak you do not see until the floor is damaged. When my mother was no longer here, everything changed fast. One day, she was part of my life, and then she was not. People around me spoke in soft tones. Adults handled paperwork. The house filled with visitors who brought food and spoke about being strong. I felt like I was watching my life from outside my own body. Rick became the center of everything. He talked to banks, lawyers, and relatives. He carried folders. He made phone calls. He used phrases like my late wife and her wishes. People nodded at him and thanked him for being responsible. They looked at me like a sad detail. I remember asking a question about my mother's things, not in a demanding way. I was a teenager. I was trying to understand what happened to her life and the parts of it that belonged to me. Rick gave me a look that felt like a door closing. He told me he was handling it. He said it was complicated. He said I would not understand. He said I should focus on school and let adults manage adult matters. I tried again later. I asked about my mother's accounts. I asked about the house. I asked if there was anything I needed to sign. Rick's voice stayed calm. He said I had no legal role. He said I was not included in those decisions. He said the estate was protected and managed. He said my mother trusted him. Then he added the sentence that stayed with me for decades. He said I was not even related to him, so I had no standing to question him. The way he said it was not loud. That is what made it worse. He said it like a fact, like gravity. A few months later, I turned 19. I was still trying to finish school. I was still grieving in a way I did not know how to explain. Rick told me it was time for me to leave. He said young men should not linger. He said I needed to build my own life. He told me he was being generous by giving me a short deadline. He said I could not stay in his house anymore. I asked where I should go. He said that was my problem. I asked if he could help me with a deposit for a room. He said he had responsibilities. He said he had to protect what my mother left behind. He said he could not waste resources on someone who did not plan ahead. I packed my things into a bag. I took a few photos. I took one small box with my mother's handwriting on some cards. I left the rest because I did not have space. Rick watched me from the doorway. He did not offer a ride. He did not ask if I was safe. He stood there like a man watching a chore finish. I walked to a bus stop with my bag. I remember the weight on my shoulder and the way cars passed without slowing down. That moment became a marker in my life. Everything after that was after I left that house. I tried to go to community college. I worked nights and attended classes in the morning. I fell asleep in lectures sometimes. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I would climb out. But small problems piled up. My car broke down. I could not afford repairs. I missed shifts. Then I missed payments. I moved from room to room, then to small apartments, always counting the cost of each move. I did not have a safety net. I did not have a parent to call. Friends were kind, but friends have their own limits. I learned to accept help without expecting it again. I learned to keep my needs small so I would not disappoint anyone. Over the years, I did many jobs: warehouse work, delivery work, maintenance, then tires. The tire shop was not my dream. It was steady work I could do with my hands. It was also work that made people underestimate you. Customers would speak to me slowly, like I could not follow simple words. Some would avoid looking at my face. Some would treat me like I was part of the floor. I got used to being treated as replaceable. In some ways, it was simpler. If people assume you do not matter, they do not ask for much beyond the job. But it also does something to your spirit. It makes you feel like your life is a hallway people walk through without noticing the walls. I heard about Rick from a distance. Sometimes I saw his name in local news articles about donations and community projects. Sometimes I saw photos online because people reposted them. He always looked clean and calm. He always had a hand on someone's shoulder like he was guiding them. People wrote comments about how generous he was. They called him a pillar. They called him a leader. I never commented. I never argued. I did not have proof of anything. I had only a story, and stories without documents are easy to crush. Once, when I was in my late 20s, I tried to contact him. I called the old house number. He answered. He recognized my voice. He spoke like we were distant acquaintances. I told him I was trying to get on my feet. I asked if there was anything my mother left for me. He said there was nothing. He said I needed to stop living in the past. He said I was an adult, and I should act like one. Then he ended the call. Another time, years later, I saw him at a community event by accident. I had come to do a small job for a vendor. He saw me and stared for a moment like he was looking at a problem he thought was solved. He walked over with a practiced smile. He told me I looked tired. He told me time had not been kind. He said that in front of other people, like it was casual conversation. Then he told them he barely knew me, but he wished me well. The people around him nodded and smiled. They believed him because his confidence felt like truth. After that, I stopped trying. I focused on survival. I paid rent. I kept my record clean. I did not get into fights. I did not take risks. I told myself the past was done. But the past has a way of sitting under your skin. It waits for a reason to wake up. That is what that briefcase did. It gave my past a reason. The morning after I called the law firm number, I went to work like normal. I did not tell Omar why the number mattered to me. I did not tell Nate either. I kept it contained. I worked and stayed quiet. Inside, my mind kept building the same question again and again. If those papers were real, then my life might not have been bad luck. It might have been planned. It might have been engineered by a man who knew how to wear a clean suit and speak calmly. At lunch, I sat on an overturned bucket behind the bay door and checked my phone. There was a message from an unknown number. It was from the firm's receptionist. She said she had a note about my call. She asked me to confirm my full name. She also asked me to confirm the family name Anderson and the year 2006. I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands were steady, but my throat felt tight. For years, when people asked about my family, I kept answers short. I did not want pity. I did not want questions. Now, a stranger in an office was asking for the exact words I had kept locked away. I typed my name carefully. Then I typed my mother's maiden name, the one I had not written in years. I read it twice before I sent it. Then I sent it and put my phone face down, like I needed a moment of quiet just to breathe. My phone stayed quiet for a few hours after I sent my name. I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept replaying small details from the past. Not big scenes, small scenes. The way Rick held folders like he owned the air around him. The way adults nodded when he spoke. The way I learned to swallow questions because questions did not change anything. That afternoon, Omar came into the bay and told me the Mercedes customer had called back. Omar said the customer was upset and wanted the briefcase returned the same day. Omar told me to be careful and keep everything clean. He said we needed to protect the shop. He said people like that can cause problems if they feel stressed. I told him I understood. I offered to drive it over after my shift if Omar wanted a witness with the return. Omar said he would do it himself. He said it was safer that way. He did not mean it as an insult, but it landed like one. It sounded like I was always a risk, even when I followed rules. Nate saw my face and asked if I was fine. I told him I was fine. Nate nodded, but his eyes stayed on me for a moment longer than normal. He knew something was different. He did not push. That is how Nate is. When my shift ended, I did not go straight home. I went to the public library. The library is quiet in a way that feels honest. No one tries to sell you anything. No one asks you to smile. You can sit and think, and no one tells you to hurry. I sat at a corner desk and searched for basic information about estates, wills, and disputes. I did not try to become an expert in one night. I just tried to learn the words people use. I learned that courts care about dates, witnesses, and records. I learned that emotions do not move paper. Paper moves paper. I wrote down a list of questions in a cheap notebook. I wrote them in simple language like I was talking to myself. I wrote what year my mother was gone from my life. I wrote my age at the time. I wrote Rick's full name. I wrote my mother's maiden name. Then I wrote the label I had seen, exactly as it appeared. I did not add anything to it. I kept it plain. From there, I started a timeline. At first, it was only a few points. Marriage, change in the house, the moment Rick started speaking for my mother, the day I was told to leave. Each point had a month and a year, even if I was not fully sure. I marked uncertain dates with a small symbol, so I would not treat guesses like facts. On the way home, I stopped at my storage unit. I keep a small unit because I never fully trusted that my life would stay stable. When you move a lot, you learn to keep your past in boxes you can carry. The unit smelled like dust and cold air. I opened it and pulled out a plastic bin labeled with my handwriting. Inside were photos, cards, and a few papers I saved because they had my mother's handwriting. I found a birthday card she wrote when I was younger. She had written my full name and her maiden name at the bottom, like she wanted me to remember it. I held that card for a long time. I did not cry. I just stood there and let the feeling pass through me, like a wave that does not knock you down but still leaves you wet. At home, I put the notebook on my kitchen table. I made coffee even though it was late. I stared at the wall and listened to the refrigerator hum. Then my phone buzzed again. It was another message from the law firm receptionist. She said the attorney assigned to the matter wanted a short call. She asked if I could speak the next morning. I replied yes. I kept the message short. Then I put my phone down and forced myself to sleep. I needed my mind clear. I could not afford to be dramatic. I could not afford to sound unstable. If I wanted anyone in a professional office to take me seriously, I needed to be calm. The next morning, I took the call during a break behind the shop. A woman introduced herself as Paula Keene. She said she worked in probate and estate disputes. She said she could not discuss confidential details over a short call, but she needed to confirm certain basics. She asked about my connection to the Anderson name. She asked about my mother's full legal name and the year tied to the folder label. I answered carefully. I told her I was my mother's son. I told her her maiden name was Anderson. I told her the year matched the period after she was no longer here. I also told her I saw the label by accident and I did not take anything. I explained that the briefcase belonged to a shop customer and the shop logged it properly. Paula's voice stayed steady. She said the proper handling mattered. She said I should keep doing everything through correct channels. She said she wanted to meet in person. She said she would send an appointment time through the receptionist. Then she said something that shifted my posture in a quiet way. She said my name appeared in their old notes, but the situation had been complicated by paperwork that did not align. She said that was why they were still careful with that case name. When the call ended, I leaned against the wall behind the bay door and stared at the concrete. The air smelled like exhaust. A truck rolled by on the road. Nothing in the world had changed, but inside me something had clicked into place. For years I told myself I was simply unlucky. I told myself I was a man who did not get a fair start. I told myself the past was a closed door. Now, it felt like the door had not been locked. It had been held shut by someone with a key. Later that week, Omar told me the Mercedes customer had come for the briefcase, and everything was fine. He said the customer thanked him and left quickly. Omar said the customer seemed relieved. He said the shop would probably get a good review. He said I should learn from it and be more aware when working with high-end cars. I did not argue. I only nodded. But I noticed how Omar framed it, like the situation was my responsibility. I noticed how people shift blame to the worker by habit. It reminded me of Rick. Rick also liked to frame things as my weakness, my lack of planning, my lack of value, always my lack. That weekend, I took a bus to my old neighborhood. I did not have a clear reason at first. I told myself I was just walking, but my feet carried me to the street where the house still stood. The trees were taller now. The sidewalk had cracks I remembered from childhood. I stopped across the street and looked at the front of the house. I did not go to the door. I did not knock. I just stood on the public sidewalk and watched. The windows looked clean. The yard looked cared for. It was strange to see a place that once held my entire world now holding someone else's calm. An older woman stepped out of a nearby house and recognized me. Her name was Mrs. Danner. She lived 2 doors down when I was young. Her hair was gray now, but her eyes were sharp. She asked if I was my mother's boy. I said yes. She said she was sorry about what happened back then. She said she remembered how quickly things changed after my mother was no longer around. She said Rick took over the house like a man taking over a job. I listened more than I spoke. Mrs. Danner said she remembered a man coming to the house with papers. She said it was around the time people were bringing food and speaking softly. She said Rick was angry that day, but he hid it when neighbors walked by. She said my mother used to keep a small metal box in the kitchen cabinet for important items, and she wondered what happened to it. I thanked her. I did not ask her to do anything. I did not want to pull her into a mess, but I wrote her words in my notebook when I got home. I wrote them with the date. I wrote that she remembered papers and a metal box. I wrote it as a memory, not as proof. A few days later, I saw online that Rick would be at a community center event. It was one of those local award nights where people clap for donations and leadership. I did not plan to go at first. Then I realized something simple. Rick's power was not only money. His power was the story people told about him. If I wanted to understand how he built that story, I needed to see it up close. I went to the community center wearing clean jeans and a plain jacket. I sat in the back. The room was bright with overhead lights. People wore nice clothes. They hugged and smiled. A table near the entrance had a sign-in sheet and printed programs. Rick's name was on the front in large letters. When Rick walked in, the room shifted toward him. People stood. Hands reached out. Smiles widened. Rick moved slowly, like he wanted everyone to see him. He shook hands and nodded and placed a hand on shoulders like he was blessing people with attention. I stayed still. I watched. I felt invisible, which was normal for me. Then Rick turned his head and saw me. His face did not change much, but his eyes narrowed in a way I remembered from my teenage years. Rick walked over during a break in the program. He did not raise his voice. He spoke to me with that calm control he always used. He asked why I was there. He said this was not a place for personal drama. He said people came for community, not for old family problems. I told him I was only attending a public event. I told him I was not there to cause trouble. Rick leaned closer and said I had always been a problem because I could not accept reality. He said I had no connection to his family and I should stop acting like I belonged. He said if I stayed, he would ask staff to remove me. The word remove hit me hard. Not because it frightened me, but because it echoed the day I was told to leave the house. It was the same control, the same goal, the same message. You do not belong. You can be pushed out any time. I looked at him and kept my face calm. I told him I understood. I stood up and walked out without arguing. As I passed the entrance table, I noticed a volunteer watching us with an uncomfortable expression. I noticed how quickly people looked away when they sensed tension around a respected man. Outside, the air was cold. The parking lot was full of clean cars. I stood under a light pole for a minute and let the feeling settle. I did not feel rage. I felt clarity. Rick still believed he could move me like a chair. He still believed the world would accept his version of me without question. On the bus ride home, I opened my notebook and added one new line. I wrote that Rick tried to push me out of a public space again, with witnesses nearby. I did not write insults. I did not write feelings. I wrote what happened in plain words. That night, I cleaned my kitchen table and made 2 piles. One pile was my normal life, bills, receipts, work schedule. The other pile was my new life. The notebook, the old card with my mother's writing, a list of names, and a list of places to visit for records. I understood something simple. For years, I had tried to survive by staying small. Now, I needed to survive by being precise. I could not fight Rick with noise. I could only meet him where he felt safe, in offices, in systems, in rules, in the same structures he used to push me out. The next morning, before work, I checked my calendar and marked the appointment time the receptionist sent. I put the address under it. Then I placed the notebook in my bag like it was a tool, not a weapon, not a symbol, just a tool. At the shop, I worked the day like normal. I kept my voice steady. I did not tell Omar anything personal. I did not tell Nate everything either. I only told Nate I had some family paperwork to sort out and I might need a day off soon. Nate nodded and said he could cover a shift if needed. I went home that evening, washed the rubber smell from my hands as best I could, and laid my clothes out for the next day. I did not know exactly what I would hear in that law office. I did not know how far the truth would go. But I knew this much. Rick had spent decades teaching me I was powerless. He had used calm words and clean rooms to do it. So I decided I would step into those clean rooms too, with my calm face, and let the right people look at the right facts. The next day, I took the morning off work. I told Omar I had an appointment I could not move. He asked what kind. I told him it was personal paperwork. He did not like it, but he agreed. He reminded me I was hourly. I told him I understood. I rode the bus into the downtown area where the law offices are. The buildings there have clean glass and quiet lobbies. People walk with purpose. They hold coffee cups and phone cases like they belong to that world. I walked slower than them because I did not want to look rushed. I also did not want to look lost. The law firm lobby was quiet. The floor was polished, the chairs were soft and expensive. A receptionist greeted me with a professional smile and asked my name. I gave it. She checked a screen and asked me to sit. I sat with my hands on my knees like a man waiting for a job interview. While I waited, I looked at the walls. There were framed awards and photos of buildings. There were also books that looked like they had never been opened. Everything felt designed to say the same thing: order, control, authority. I thought about how Rick always looked comfortable in rooms like this. I thought about how I always felt like I had to prove I deserved the air. A door opened, and a woman called my name. She introduced herself as Paula Keene. She was not warm in a soft way, but she was not cold either. Her voice was clear. She did not waste words. She guided me into a small office and asked me to sit. She asked me to explain, in my own words, why I called. I told her the simple truth. I told her I saw a folder label by accident inside a briefcase at my job. I told her, It had my mother's maiden name on it. I told her the year matched the period after my mother was not in my life anymore. I told her I did not take anything, and the briefcase was returned through shop policy. Paula listened without interrupting. Then she asked me questions that felt like a checklist. She asked my mother's full legal name. She asked my birth date. She asked where we lived when I was younger. She asked when Rick entered our lives. She asked the date I was told to leave the house. She asked if I had any written items from my mother. She asked if I had any relatives on my mother's side who might still be reachable. I answered what I could. When I was not sure, I said I was not sure. Paula nodded each time I admitted uncertainty, like she respected accuracy more than confidence. She told me she could not promise outcomes. She said the system does not run on fairness. It runs on verifiable steps. She said if there was an issue, it would be handled through proper channels. She also said I should not confront Rick. She said people who feel protected by reputation often make mistakes when they think nothing can touch them. She said I should let the process do the pressure. I told her I understood. I told her I did not want noise. I wanted clarity. She asked me to sign basic releases so her office could request certain records. She explained it in plain language. She said the first stage was gathering what could be gathered without drama. She said if anything was missing, that missing space might matter too. Before I left, Paula gave me a short list of things to do on my side. She told me to write down every address I lived at during key years. She told me to list every person who might remember something from that time, even if it was small. She told me to keep my notebook factual, not emotional. She said emotions are real, but courts respect structure. When I walked out of her office, I felt lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because someone finally spoke to me like my questions were allowed. Heavier because I realized this was not one conversation. It was a long road. On the way home, I stopped at the county records office. The building looked tired. The chairs were hard. The line moved slowly. People held folders and envelopes. I watched how they spoke to the clerks. The ones who got help were the ones who asked in the right format. When it was my turn, I spoke calmly. I told the clerk I needed to request public probate records connected to a specific name and year range. The clerk was a man with tired eyes and a flat voice. His name tag said Mr. Wiley. He did not care about my story. That was fine. I did not need him to care. I needed him to follow procedure. He asked for identification. I gave it. He asked me to fill out a request form. I did. He told me what could be provided and what required additional steps. He told me there were fees for copies. I counted my money carefully before I agreed. Then I paid for the basic items he said were available. Mr. Wiley gave me a receipt with a pickup date. He told me to keep it safe. I put it in my wallet like it was more important than cash. After that, I walked to a local bank branch. I did not go to ask for my mother's information. I knew it would not work like that. I went to ask general questions about how older account changes are recorded and what kind of verification exists when beneficiaries or authority roles change. I needed to understand the shape of the system, not force it. A banker met me at a small desk. She spoke politely. She asked what I needed. I told her I was trying to understand process for a family matter and I wanted to avoid mistakes. I kept it general. I did not ask her to break rules. I asked what documents banks keep and how long they keep them. I asked what can be requested through official channels. I asked what kind of proof they look for when someone claims to have authority. She gave me careful answers. She used words like policy and retention and authorization. I wrote down those words. I wrote down what I could ask for later through formal requests if my attorney needed it. She also told me a basic truth I already knew but needed to hear from a professional. She said banks do not move on feelings, they move on paperwork. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and opened my notebook. I made a clean list of tasks, addresses, names, dates. I wrote Mrs. Danner's name and phone number. I wrote the county office pickup date. I wrote the bank terms I learned. I wrote the name Paula Keene again, just to remind myself this was real. I also organized my apartment like I was preparing for an inspection. I cleared the table. I bought a cheap set of folders from a discount store. I labeled them with simple words: timeline, contacts, receipts, notes. I did not put anything dramatic in them. I did not need drama. I needed order. At work, people noticed I was quieter than usual. Omar asked if I was distracted. I told him I was fine. He said he needed me focused because we had a busy week coming. I told him I would be focused. Then he made another comment that stayed with me. He said I was dependable because I did not have big opportunities pulling me away. He said some workers leave as soon as life improves, but I was steady. He said it like it was praise. I nodded. I kept my face neutral. Inside, I felt the familiar sting of being described as a man with nowhere else to go. Later that day, a younger tech joined the crew for training. He was loud. He wanted attention. He talked in a way that tried to turn work into a performance. When he introduced himself, he looked at me and asked if I was the long-timer in the back. He said it with a grin, like it was a joke. Omar laughed lightly. Nate did not laugh. I did not react. I just kept working. But I noticed how people treat quiet men as furniture. They talk around you. They label you. They assume you will not correct them. That night, Paula's office called again. The receptionist told me Paula wanted a few more details for the record. I took the call in my kitchen. Paula asked about any items my mother kept in the house that could have held important paperwork. I told her about the small things I remembered. A drawer where my mother kept bills, a folder she used for medical papers, a box she kept for cards and letters. I also told Paula what Mrs. Danner remembered about a metal box in a kitchen cabinet. Paula asked if Mrs. Danner would be willing to speak with the firm if needed. I told her I could ask. Paula said I should not pressure anyone. She said simple confirmation from a neutral person can matter. The next day, I visited Mrs. Danner in the afternoon. I brought a small bag of tea from the store as a thank you. I did not make it a big moment. I told her I was sorting out old family matters and someone might contact her for a short statement about what she remembered from that time. I told her there was no need to add anything. I told her honesty was enough. Mrs. Danner said she understood. She said she never liked how quickly I was pushed out of my own home. She said neighbors noticed more than people think. She said she would speak the truth if asked. I thanked her and left. A few days later, I went back to the county records office to pick up what I requested. Mr. Wiley recognized me. He slid an envelope across the counter and told me to check the pages before I left. He told me to make sure it matched what I ordered. I looked at the page count and the labels on the outside. I did not open anything there in the office. I just confirmed the basics and thanked him. I held the envelope carefully on the bus ride home. It was not heavy, but it felt important. It felt like the first brick in a wall I was finally allowed to build. At home, I did not spread anything across the table like a movie scene. I kept it simple. I placed the envelope in a folder. I wrote the date on the folder. I added a note in my notebook about where it came from and who gave it to me. Then, I put the folder away in a safe spot. Over the next week, I kept doing small steps. I asked Paula's office what else they needed from me. I wrote down old addresses and checked them against my memory. I looked up dates on old pay stubs and lease emails. I kept my timeline cleaner each time I adjusted it. I did not guess if I could avoid it. During that same week, Rick's name started showing up more in local posts and event announcements. A hotel fundraiser, a community leadership dinner, a photo with a ribbon, a caption about honor and service. The comments were full of praise. People wrote that Rick was a good man. People wrote that he deserved recognition. I stared at those posts longer than I should have. Not because I wanted his life, because I wanted the truth to matter as much as his image. Then something else happened. I received a message request from an account I did not recognize at first. The profile photo showed a woman in a bright dress at a formal event. The name was Kara Colton, Rick's daughter. I had only seen her a few times in my life. She was younger than me by more than a decade, and she carried Rick's confidence like it was an accessory. Her message was short. She said she heard I had been asking questions. She said it would be better for everyone if I stopped. She said Rick did not want trouble. She said I should focus on my own life and let the past stay quiet. I did not reply right away. I read it twice. Then I took a screenshot and saved it to a folder on my phone with a simple label. I did not add commentary. I did not respond with anger. I just documented the moment. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my notebook open. I wrote one line about Kara's message, date, time, wording. Then I closed the notebook and looked at the wall again. Rick was still doing what he always did. He was using calm pressure and social weight to keep me small. Kara was doing it too, as if it was family tradition. I drank my coffee and kept my voice steady, even though I was alone. I told myself I would not fight them in comment sections. I would not argue in hallways. I would not plead for respect from people who treat respect like a gift they control. I would do the work. I would follow the steps. I would let the systems they trust look at what they do not want seen. The days after Kara's message felt strangely quiet. Not because life became easier, but because I stopped expecting kindness from the wrong places. I kept working. I kept showing up on time. I kept my face neutral in the bay. But inside, I began to move with a different purpose. I did not answer Kara. I did not block her either. I left the message where it was and saved the screenshot in my folder. I treated it like a calendar note, not as drama, not as a fight, just as a fact that happened. Paula called 2 days later and asked me to come in again. She did not sound excited or angry. She sounded focused. She said she had reviewed what her office could access and what still needed formal steps. She said she needed me to confirm a few details and sign a few basic items that allowed her to request more. I took another morning off work. Omar sighed when I asked. He asked if this was going to become a pattern. I told him I would make up hours if I could. Omar said he needed reliability. He said I was not young anymore, and jobs like this do not hold places for people who disappear. He said it like a warning wrapped in advice. I nodded and said I understood. Then I went anyway. In Paula's office, she laid out the process in simple terms. She told me there was a difference between suspicion and proof. She told me that if I wanted a clean result, I needed clean steps. She asked me to walk her through the timeline again, not as a story, but as a sequence. I spoke slowly. I gave dates when I had them. I marked uncertain dates as uncertain. I told her what I remembered about the house and how Rick handled everything. I told her about being pushed out at 19. I told her about the sentence he used. I told her I did not have money or support back then. I told her I had accepted that I could not fight a person with resources. Paula listened and wrote notes. Then she asked something that made me pause. She asked if my mother ever spoke about money in front of me, not numbers, just anything about planning, anything about protection, anything about where she wanted things to go if she was not there. I told Paula my mother once said she wanted me safe. She once said she did not want me to struggle like she struggled when she was younger. She said it during a normal day in the kitchen while she was writing something on a notepad. It did not feel like a big conversation at the time. It felt like a mother speaking from tired love. I told Paula that was all I had. Paula nodded and said even small memories can support a bigger pattern. She said she would not build a case on memories alone. She said she would use records. She said my job was to stay steady and let her office do the formal work. Before I left, she asked again about the briefcase. I explained for the third time how it was logged and returned. Paula said the way I handled that mattered. She said I did not try to benefit from it. She said that kind of discipline is rare, and it protects me. On my way out, The receptionist handed me an appointment card for a future date. It was plain. It had a time and an address. I put it in my wallet behind my bus pass. I went straight from the law office to the county records building again. I did not have a new request that day. I went to ask one question about procedure. Mr. Wiley was at the counter again. He looked up and recognized me. I asked how corrections are handled when older filings are challenged. I asked if there were specific forms or if everything goes through hearings. Mr. Wiley did not explain it like a teacher. He explained it like a man who repeats the same answers daily. He said most things run through formal motions and scheduled sessions. He said there are steps and notices. He said people do not get surprised if the system is followed. He said the system gives everyone a chance to respond. I thanked him. That line stayed in my head. A chance to respond. Rick always liked to respond in rooms where he controlled the story. I wondered what he looked like in a room where the story was controlled by records. In the weeks that followed, I kept collecting small pieces of my own life. Not evidence, just anchors. I pulled up old email accounts to find lease confirmations. I found a pay stub from years ago that listed my address at the time. I printed it at the library and placed it in my folder. I found a message from an old friend that mentioned the day I moved out of my mother's house. I did not ask the friend to swear to anything. I just saved the date. I also changed my habits. I stopped leaving my notebook out on the table when I was not home. I did not want anyone to stumble onto it. I kept it in a drawer. I kept my folders in a box under my bed. The box was not locked. It did not need to be locked. It just needed to be out of sight. At the tire shop, the younger tech kept trying to joke with me. He wanted a reaction. He wanted me to act like a character in his story. One day, he asked if I ever dreamed of having a car like the Mercedes customer's car. He said he could not imagine spending his life tightening bolts for other people. I kept my voice calm and told him every job matters if you do it right. He laughed and said that sounded like something an old man would say. Omar heard it and smiled like it was harmless. Nate did not smile. After the younger tech walked away, Nate told me quietly that people talk too much when they feel safe. He said they do not realize they are building a record of who they are. I nodded. Nate was right. Rick talked too much when he felt safe, too. That was how he revealed himself to me at the community center. He did not need to shout. He only needed to assume he could still push me. One afternoon, Paula's office called and asked if I could come in after work for a short meeting. I went straight from the shop without going home first. I still had the smell of rubber on me, even after washing my hands. I felt out of place in that clean lobby. But I reminded myself I was not there to look impressive. I was there to be accurate. Paula asked me a few more confirmation questions. She asked about any contact I had with Rick over the years. I told her about the phone call in my late 20s. I told her about seeing him at a community event years later. I told her how he spoke about barely knowing me. I told her about the recent community center moment where he tried to push me out again. Paula asked if anyone saw that exchange. I told her a volunteer at the entrance table looked uncomfortable and watched us. I told her I did not know the volunteer's name. Paula said that was fine. She said patterns matter even when names are missing. She said the core of this is still records, but patterns help explain records. Then she asked about Kara's message. I told her I saved it. Paula told me to keep it saved. She told me not to reply. She said people sometimes try to create a reaction, because reactions can be used to change the focus. She said staying calm is not weakness. She said staying calm is strategy. When I left Paula's office that evening, the sun was low. The streetlights were coming on. People were walking toward restaurants and parking garages. I walked toward the bus stop with my hands in my pockets. I felt tired, but it was a cleaner tiredness than before. It felt like I was building something instead of sinking. A few days after that, I saw another announcement online for the hotel fundraiser honoring Rick. The post included a photo of the ballroom and a list of sponsors. I recognized a few names: business owners, community board members, People who like to be seen next to money and leadership. I did not plan to attend. Then I realized it might matter. Not because I needed to confront him there. I did not. But because seeing how he moved in that setting reminded me of what I was up against. It also reminded me what he believed. He believed the crowd would always protect him. The night of the fundraiser, I got off work early enough to go home and clean up. I took a shower and stood under the water longer than normal. I let it hit my shoulders and slow my breathing. I shaved carefully. I put on a plain button-up shirt and clean pants. I wore simple shoes that looked neat but did not try to look expensive. Before I left, I checked my phone battery. I charged it to full. I packed my wallet, my bus pass, and a small notepad. Then I sat at my kitchen table and looked at my calendar. I looked at the dates I had written down. I looked at the appointment card in my wallet. I told myself again that I would handle everything through the systems that respect procedure. The hotel parking garage was bright and echoing. Cars moved slowly, guided by attendants. I walked past vehicles that cost more than my yearly pay. I did not stare. I did not touch anything. I kept my eyes forward. Inside, the lobby smelled like polished floors and perfume. People laughed in groups. They held drinks and small plates. A photographer was taking pictures near a sign with Rick's name and the event title. I stayed away from that area. I did not want to end up in someone's photo as a background detail. In the ballroom, the lighting was warm. The tables had decorations. People wore suits and dresses. Rick stood near the front, greeting guests. He looked calm and confident, like he was receiving what he deserved. I stayed near the side wall and watched. I noticed how people leaned toward him when he spoke. I noticed how he made small jokes, and people laughed like they were rewarded. I noticed how he kept his voice low, so others leaned in. It made him feel like a center. Kara was there too. She moved through the room like she belonged to it. She saw me within minutes. Her face did not show surprise. It showed control. She walked over with a polite smile that did not reach her eyes. She spoke softly and told me this was not the place for old issues. She told me Rick was being honored, and I should not embarrass anyone. She told me I could leave quietly and avoid making things hard for myself. I kept my voice calm and told her I was not there to create trouble. I told her it was a public event and I had a right to attend. Kara's smile tightened. She said I was making a mistake. She said some doors close permanently when you push too hard. I did not argue. I told her I understood her position. Then I stepped away and returned to my spot by the wall. A few minutes later, Rick approached. He did not come with anger. He came with his practiced calm. He told me I looked out of place. He told me people were watching. He told me I had always struggled with understanding what I am allowed to do. I looked at him and kept my expression neutral. I told him I was not there to fight. Rick said he hoped that was true because he did not want to see me removed from a respectable place again. He said that word again, like it was a habit. I nodded and said I understood. Then I turned slightly, not as a sign of fear, but as a sign that I would not give him a scene. The program began soon after. A speaker took the microphone and praised Rick's leadership. Another speaker thanked him for generosity. People clapped. Phones were lifted to record. A toast was announced. Glasses were raised. Rick smiled and accepted the applause like it was normal weather. I stood still and watched the room react to him. I felt the old pressure in my chest, the one that used to make me feel small. But it did not grow into panic. It settled into focus. When the event ended, I left without saying goodbye. I walked back through the lobby and into the parking garage. The air was cooler there. The echo of the ballroom faded behind the closing doors. On the bus ride home, I stared at my reflection in the dark window. I looked like a normal man, a working man, a man people pass without noticing. That used to feel like defeat. That night, it felt like cover. At home, I placed my shoes by the door and sat at the kitchen table. I opened my calendar and checked the dates again. Then I set my phone on the table and turned the sound up. If a call came in, I wanted to hear it. I wanted to follow the next step without delay. Before bed, I wrote one short entry in my notebook about the fundraiser. I wrote who spoke to me and what they said in plain words. I wrote it without anger. Then I closed the notebook, put it back in the drawer, and set my alarm for the morning. I arrived at the probate courthouse before the doors fully opened. I wore the same plain shirt from the fundraiser, freshly pressed. Paula met me in the lobby and kept her voice low. She told me to let her do the talking and to answer only what I was asked. Rick arrived 10 minutes later with 2 attorneys and the confident walk he uses when cameras might be near. Kara was with him. She looked at me once, then looked away like I was a stain on the floor. In the hearing room, Paula placed a clean folder on the table and began in a simple order. She explained that the will Rick used after my mother was gone did not match the verified version on file. She showed the court the filing timeline and the gaps where key pages should have been. She showed the witness list and compared it to records showing those people were not available in the place and time Rick claimed. Then she presented the signature verification report and the notary log. She laid out how the ink and signature patterns did not line up with my mother's known handwriting from dated cards and forms. She also showed bank authority changes tied to the same window of time, with the exact dates they were processed. Rick's attorney tried to turn it into a family disagreement. Paula kept it procedural. She said this was not about feelings. She said it was about authenticity and control. The judge asked Rick direct questions. Rick answered with confidence at first, then shorter, then not at all. Kara's posture shifted when the judge pointed to the witness mismatch and asked why it was never disclosed. The judge issued immediate orders. Rick was removed from estate control roles, key transactions were paused, and the court authorized corrective filings and a formal review by the appropriate offices. When the clerk stamped the order, the sound was sharp in the quiet room. Rick stood up like he expected the room to follow him. Nobody did. I walked out beside Paula, and I did not look back when Rick's attorney called my name.